Hi, this is Ryan McReynolds, candidate for state representative in the 94th District. And, well, first of all, here's an update. As you may have known from a previous video, there was going to be 4 Republicans running, but I have since learned recently that Dennis Kraft, who was going to be the 4th Republican candidate for state representative, has decided that he's going to run for another term as county commissioner, instead of pursuing state representative like he was supposedly going to plan, as was previously reported in Saginaw News on the Frankenmuth News. Well, anyways, I do wish him well on the whole thing of, choosing to run for another term as county commissioner instead of being another one of the candidates for state rep. Yeah, it's kind of saddening, really. I guess, what, he's not going to be on for state rep. So, I mean, in a way, I'm sad to see him not being, a fellow candidate for state representative. But I wish him well in his endeavor to stay on as county commissioner. But anyways, there's, some other pressing points to bring up here. First of all, you may notice that this video is in black and white instead of in color. And you may be wondering why. You're probably saying, why is this video in black and white? Why is it not in color? Well, I'm going to tell you. Okay, first of all, I'm going to speak of a situation that is not so colorful. Okay? Guess what it is? The public school system is in shambles. It's in shambles in the state of Michigan, and it's in shambles all over the country. No joke. Now, some of you may be wondering what I am talking about here. But then again, some of you may already know what I'm saying. But some of you may also be asking, didn't you attend public schools? Why, yes, I did. And let me tell you something here. Okay? Now, I'm 33 years old right now, okay? And, I was born right here in the state of Michigan, except I wasn't born in Birch Run where I live now, nor was I born within the county of residence, Saginaw County, which means I obviously wasn't born within my district that I'm running in, District 94. I was born, in Rochester Hills in Oakland County. Of course, back then it was called Avon Township when I was born there, but then they, later changed the name when they went from township to city. However, there was that brief time, though, when I ended up living in the state of Texas. Some of you watching this, if you're from older generations, you probably remember that time when the economy of Michigan went bust during the Carter years, especially after the Iranian oil crisis. And loads of people, including my dad, wound up out of work. Okay? So a whole lot of people in Michigan, including my dad, ended up applying for work in Texas. My grandmother, on my mom's side, allowed for my dad to use the travel trailer to live down in Texas until he was able to afford to get a place for the family and send for the rest of us. And so there it was, he went down to Texas in 1981 for work, and then months after he moved down there, he sent for my mom and my sister and I to come down there. And so we moved down there. And there was some stuff noticed with me, okay? And so I got taken to different hospitals and places and stuff, and one of them was the famous Methodist Medical Center in Houston, Texas. And if you've ever seen the show Walker, Texas Ranger, you've probably seen that building on that TV show, okay? Anyways, it was at that very place that I was diagnosed with autism. Although the full readouts at the time were mild infantile autism and early infantile autism. Now, some of you may be thinking, where does that infantile part come in? And as I understand it, there are some people on the spectrum today who actually find infantile offensive, okay? But you know what? I've read my own medical files. I know what's written in them, okay? I mean, not everybody has read their own medical files if they're diagnosed with disabilities, but I certainly have read some of them, you know? I mean, I probably haven't read every single medical file, since there's probably piles and piles of them on me, but I've read some of them, you know, and I've actually kind of been very intrigued by what some of the medical files have said about me, okay? So, of course, you know, effort was made to have early intervention done on me, plus, at that time, the late, great President Ronald Reagan had signed a bill into law that guaranteed that individuals with autism would get accepted into mainstream schools and all that. Okay? And so, of course, got to start school down in Texas. You know what? There's all these different types of programs in the school systems for individuals with disabilities, including autism. For instance, one of them is AI, which stands for Autistic Impaired. However, Autistic Impaired classrooms usually ended up being for individuals who were severe in their autism, meaning the individual either couldn't talk, or they were limited in their verbal abilities, or they were limited in their conceptual level of things. But being, you know, I'm high functioning, as you can tell from this video, well, that meant that very likely I couldn't be put into any of the AI rooms. So, what happened in essence was there was, you know, these other programs put in place as well. For instance, you know, they've got, like, other types of programs, like they've got LD classrooms, that stands for Learning Disabled. They've got EI classrooms, that stands for Emotionally Impaired. Now, I had been in LD and EI rooms in the regular public schools, especially with there being lack of classrooms for some of the other disabilities, even though there's other types of programs set up as well, like, in addition to, you know, also having AI, LD, and EI, there's also TMI, which stands for Trainable Mentally Impaired, which, well, some of you probably already know about that one labeling called mental retardation, and some people like to call it MR instead of mentally retarded or retarded, because of the fact that the word retarded does tend to offend some people, and I know exactly why too, because in my school days, I had to deal with ignorant idiots calling me retard or retarded, and I was like, I am not retarded, and that sort of thing. And some people, you know, have used that to mean dumb or stupid and all that, but as I would later find out, there would be these different labelings put on persons who really, truly were MR. Like TMI, trainable mentally impaired, which meant that even though the person was MR, the person was at least trainable and could function in life, and I'm pretty sure that was probably what was fit onto my one uncle, who happened to have been classified as MR. And he had been in special education classes himself, although back when my parents were kids, if your kids were in special ed, this child was really looked down upon for being in special ed, and the parents were looked down upon for it because so many people had the notion that special ed was for, and, you know, like, well, if you ever watched the movie Hairspray, when Ricky Lake plays Tracy Turnblad, and she is in trouble for her hairdo, and she gets told that she's going to be put in special ed, and all that, she said to the principal, "Isn't that where they put retards?" And I'm like, okay, I know Hairspray the movie and all that, but depending on the time frame that that movie takes place, there were people that really felt that way, that if you were in special ed, you were the R word, even if you weren't. Okay? And of course, you know, in the time frame that I was in school, I remember, you know, some people still acting like, oh, if you're in special ed, you're the R word, and all that. You know, certain preconceived notions, plus the individual's parents probably didn't raise that person right to begin with, which is sad. You know? Now, other kinds of programs that have existed for individuals with disability, like Clinician Team I, haven't been placed on people with MR. They've also used SMI, which stands for severely mentally impaired, meaning the impairment is worse off, the conceptual levels are down and all that, and there's SXI, which stands for severely multiply impaired, meaning there's loads of multiple severe impairments in the person. And then, of course, there's also POHI, which it's spelled P-O-H-I, and it stands for physical or otherwise health impaired, and it could, you know, include people in wheelchairs and all that. Although I did notice someone who tended to have seizures and I think was classified as epileptic or something, having, I guess, been in a POHI classroom as well or something, because I remember not everybody classified under POHI was necessarily in a wheelchair, because some other health impairment could classify a person as POHI. But anyways, I remember during my school years, well, okay, in my elementary years, you know, after moving back to Michigan from Texas, well, first of all, I'd gone to this one school in Pontiac and all that, and from what I understand, that place was called Irving Center, although I have since looked up some stuff and found out of there being a school in Pontiac called Washington Irving Elementary, although I have not yet really been able to figure out if it's the exact same school or not as Irving Center. I mean, could be, but if anybody knows any information that tells me it's the same school or tells me it's a completely different school, I mean, please tell me. But anyways, I went to that school from like 1983 to 1985, and then I'd gone to Auburn Heights Elementary from 85 to 86, and well, back when I was going to Auburn Heights Elementary, on most days I would ride on a special ed bus, because by law, if a parent wants their special needs, special ed, disabled, whatever label you want to put on a child, to ride on a different bus than what normally goes through, that parent is entitled to this, okay? And so, I mean, I got to do that, you know, and also it was a half day, in which, in that case, I ended up having to ride a bus that would have been my normal bus. Now, in that time frame, it's like, I remember, you know, dealing with that, it's like, in Irving Center, I didn't really deal with bullies so much, because nearly everybody was nice in there, but Auburn Heights Elementary, there it is, you know, I would come across these people that were mean and were bullies and all that stuff, and some would even like call me names, and I was like, hello, my name's Ryan, I have a name, and it's not the name you're trying to title me under, and all that. Well then, within the next year, I ended up, in 86, I ended up going to Stiles Elementary, because for some reason my area ended up in the boundaries for that. But basically, you know, and there it is, I got put into an LD room. Although, that year, you know, I was in first grade, and well, basically, I'd actually spend more time in the special ed room than in the regular ed room, due to, you know, that the special ed room was turned out to actually be much better, much more stable, and all that other stuff. Or it felt like a more stable environment. Anyways, even though every once in a while there were some bad apples or something that would, you know, want to act up and all that, including this one guy that had been a major bully and all that. But then, in 1987, my house ended up, you know, in the boundaries for, well, Auburn Heights Elementary got turned into administration building / early childhood center, and another building that had been used for pre-K and kindergarten got turned into Auburn Elementary, with Heights taken out of it, and, well, my house got put in the boundary for Auburn Elementary, but my mom didn't like the special ed teacher that was, you know, teaching there, so she was like, wanting me, you know, to still go to Stiles, but my sister, on the other hand, had to go to Auburn Elementary. But of course, you know, once again in Stiles I had to deal with bullies and all that, and there were like a couple of different ladies that had been playground ladies, and, well, a couple of them that knew me pretty well had been on my side, but there was one who didn't know me quite so well that one day threatened to have me and the bullies go against the wall if whatever didn't stop, and, you know, and I wasn't doing anything wrong, but not only did she make the bullies go against the wall, she made me go against the wall too, and I felt that was not fair. I was upset, but luckily, I later got to, you know, talk to one of the playground ladies that already knew me that was on my side, and I, told her what had been up and all that. And, well, the bully, he happened to have the same first name as me, although different last name, and I'm not going to say his last name in case he could be potentially watching and all that, since I don't want to risk any lawsuit if, anything, because plus I don't know if he's still a creep like he was way back when, but, there was that one day when he trampled me, and my dad took off after him, and this guy was running. Okay, and, well, that time, it's like in second grade, for a little bit, I had wound up in a lower functioning special ed room, and I don't even know why this happened. I just know it happened, but, because, in my first grade years, I was in a higher functioning special ed room, and granted, yeah, individuals that had been in that room that should have been in the lower functioning room ended up in the lower functioning room themselves too, but I ended up in the lower functioning room too, and I don't even know why the heck it happened like that. I just know it happened like that, but later on, my parents decided to have me taken out of that room and put into the higher functioning special ed room like before, even though it had a different teacher in there than before. Only the difference was that because they were also teaching in the middle school as well, it meant I'd be in the special ed room only one half the day, but the regular ed room the other half the day. But it turned out to actually work out that way, because, eventually I got to, a chance to actually try out, different subjects in the regular ed rooms, and, eventually we had a chance to figure out exactly, which school subjects I could do in the regular rooms and which ones I needed to do in special ed rooms. Like, when it came to social studies and history, because it turned out I was pretty good with those things, that, yeah, it was no problem having me do that in regular ed rooms and all that, and it was no problem having me do reading and spelling in regular ed rooms, even though eventually, on the other hand, English, I had to have in special ed rooms, but, in middle school it turned out spelling and reading was combined with English and some of the, different years and all that, so it was like, whoa, but there you have it. And of course I ended up needing special ed classes for math as well, but there you go. Okay. But anyways, here we are. It's like, in the elementary school, there were teaching staff and school officials that were, willing to solve some of the problems and all that. Like, I remember in 4th grade when one guy who was in one of my special ed classes had, kicked me or hit me or something or other, and I said something to the special ed teacher about it. The guy, of course, denied he was doing that stuff, but she had gotten several complaints about him doing that to others, and she said to him, I think Ryan's telling the truth. And she said to this guy, you want to know why I think you are lying and why I think Ryan is telling the truth about the whole thing? She said to him, it is because I get loads of complaints about you doing that stuff. And basically, in essence, she was like, Ryan's not, which is, me, my name, Ryan, She was like, Ryan's not the only one to have made a complaint about you doing this stuff. I have heard complaints from others about you doing this stuff. I have heard so many complaints about this that I think Ryan is telling the truth. That you did what he said you did. On the other hand, in middle school, it seemed though that there were some school officials that really didn't want to do much because they were like, oh, people are going to do this, that, and the other thing, you know, and same excuse got made in high school too, and looking back, it's like, well, here's a piece of evidence of public schools being in shambles, okay? Basically, it was like, the excuse was, oh, we can't be God, and we can't make our own kids do this or that. How are we going to make the kids in the school do this, that, and the other thing? Well, you know what? I think the issue here is that you guys who don't want to discipline kids when they should be disciplined are too lazy to do it, and you know what happens to some of those people that are acting real bad, totally misbehaved? Some of them end up in prison, and guess what? The guards aren't going to be too lazy to make them do stuff or tell them to do stuff, because it's like, boom, you know, these individuals that were being big-time troublemakers and all that, they didn't want to submit to the authority of their parents or any other authority, but once they're in prison, they will be submitting to the authority of the warden and the prison guards, whether they like it or not. In fact, if you ever watch shows like Beyond Scared Straight and all that, you know, the explanation is given in as to what you're going to be doing while you're locked up. And, oh my goodness, I remember, you know, the first episode of Beyond Scared Straight. I bet all those teens were attending public school, right? And like I said, it's in shambles. And I'm sure the public schools, you know, didn't do their responsibility with those teens, which was obvious because, you know, one of those teen girls referred to the warden as the President of the United States of the prison when they were, like, on their way to tour the prison and all that. Because, like, they were talking about how, you don't get to sleep as much as you want in prison, and one of them said, well, if I was a guard, I'd let him sleep as long as I want, and then another said, you don't get to make that decision if you're a guard. And then it was like, well, who gets to make that decision? The decision is made by, and one of the teams said, the decision is made by the President of the United States of the prison. Which, you know, I kind of had to laugh about that one, because I was like, they were referring to the warden as the President of the United States of the prison. Okay. Did you know what? One of those teens saw her own mom in the prison, right? And the mom was saying, you don't want to be here! Straighten up! Fly right! I suffer here every day! You don't want to suffer like me! You don't want to end up in this place! And I mean, the mom and daughter end up talking to each other, and this was the first of the teens to actually get a wake-up call. Because she was like, saw her own mom in there, and she was like, I don't want to end up like her. And here's the interesting thing, one of the teen inmates, well, I mean, they weren't, you know, arrested. I mean, they got to be treated as if they were inmates, of course, because a lot of them later got to wear, you know, the orange jumpsuits and all that. But anyways, well, one of the adult inmates, you know, trying to educate these teens, had asked one of them, well, what kind of job do you want? And one of them, or what do you want to be? And one of them said, CO, correctional officer. What? You know, if you're committing crimes out there, you can't be a correctional officer. You know that. And I remember later, like, one of the prison inmates said to the teens something like, you know, I hope you become a lawyer so you can help me get out of here. And one of them, and then, you know, she said, actually, I want to be a correctional officer. And the inmate said, okay, so you want to control me. Okay. Because, well, guess what? That's the job of a correctional officer, CO. Control the prisoner. And you know what? A lot of people in prison today weren't educated so well by the public school system. I mean, the fact of the matter is, the shamble public school system, here it is, you know, they're not teaching things they should be teaching. I mean, when my grandparents were kids, when my great-grandparents were kids, and even when my parents were kids, schools, public and private, taught some important values, which included, among other things, personal responsibility, such as teaching, you know, about being responsible for your actions, regardless of whether or not you're a disabled individual or classified as so-called normal, whatever, you know, because granted, yeah, there have been instances when a certain individual with a disability may not completely understand what they've done, especially if there's severity in their disability/disorder, but, you know, here's myself, high-functioning autistic individual, sure, I'm classified as disabled, but you know what? I even got taught about things called personal responsibility and taking responsibility for your actions, and even in my, you know, teenager years, I kind of, you know, inadvertently tried to stress that point to others, you know, like, I mean, these days, you know, I can't have dairy products and all that, and, well, I really shouldn't have had them to begin with long ago, but I didn't know that for a long time. But we now know that that's certainly had a role in what caused some of these stomach aches that I dealt with, you know, as a child and teenager and all that and stuff, but, you know, back in my high school years and all that, like, you know, in my middle school and high school years, I mean, most of my middle school years and all of high school years, I'd gone to the regular school in the morning, but a special ed school called Millett Learning Center in the afternoon, and we went for having me eat lunch at Millett Learning Center, because, you know, then I could have a much better, more stable environment and all that, but anyways, here's the thing, like, well, one day, you know, I bought a Kit Kat candy bar, which, you know, anybody who knows what Kit Kat is, they know it's like, way back when, you know, split up into 4 pieces out, and I'm assuming it probably still does that today, even though the only chocolate bars I eat now are the ones based out of soy milk and rice milk, since I can't eat dairy products, but anyways, here it is, you know, one guy, he wasn't even saying please, he was asking me to give him 2, give him half, and I'd paid 50 cents for it, and, you know, I said to him, I said, you have a quarter? And he didn't seem to grasp what I was saying, but you know what? I was right in saying this, because I was like, you know, because I was like, buddy, you're not saying please, and if you're wanting half of this, you better pay for it, because I paid for it. And some people would say, oh, but that sounds selfish. And I'm like, boom, seriously? You know, I'm willing to be generous and all that and stuff, and there's been instances when I have been generous and given and all that, whether it be in school or in various places and all that, but, you know, but I feel people need to, you know, learn that, hey, if they want something, they gotta work for it, they gotta learn to buy it themselves, instead of, you know, mooching off others just like that, and, because you know what, there are things that I managed to get taught outside the school system, such as, you know, learning how to be self-sufficient, which, you know, a good parent should do. And there's been a great deal of good reasons my parents taught me that, but you know what? there are some public schools out there that seem to not even like that idea, and okay, I know this video has gone on for a half hour already, but I'm explaining a whole lot and saying a whole lot, okay? I remember back in my days of going to Millet Learning Center, well, my last year going there, the class I was in had, like, on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday gone to Michael's to work, because I was, like, in the work experience program, and then on Tuesdays and Thursdays we went to Abel's greenhouse. And, well, I overheard the owner talking about her daughter being in special ed, and in fact, her daughter ended up actually a student at post-secondary transitional program, where I'd gone after I got out of high school and I got my diploma from post-secondary transitional program. Although, years later, I would find out this very girl happened to, like me, be autistic, and how I found that part out was when my mom had gone to some sort of doctor or medical type place and came across somebody who said something about having a niece with autism and having, like, attended post-secondary, and first name of the girl and the last name, and my mom, like, forgot the last name but said what it started with, and I was like, I know who you're and I was like, oh yeah, I know who you're definitely talking about, and all that, and I was like, I didn't know that girl had autism. But I remembered, you know, being told that she was in special ed, though, or some, but I also remember, like, when, you know, the girl's mom, the owner of Abel's Greenhouse, like, said something to my teacher that I had at Millet Learning Center at the time about the public schools, you know, trying to tell her what kind of things she should and shouldn't do with the child and all that, and I kind of was like, and even before that conversation, too, I was, like, thinking, what right does the public school have to even tell the parents what they should and shouldn't be doing with their child, let alone child classified as disabled, special needs, whatever, you know, whatever labeling you want to slap on, whatever, you know. I mean, the parent should be allowed to make the decision, not the school. I mean, the school's job is to educate in the subjects, not indoctrinate, and not to, you know, tell the kids to go against their parents, but, you know, and it also brings me back to, you know, I remember in 91 when, well, we saw that video about, you know, I made a few days ago about that boy who got issued detention because he needed to go to the bathroom to use a catheter and all that. You probably know that I talked about, you know, the worst special ed teacher I ever had that, you know, would make students punch their behavior cards if they need to go to the bathroom. Well, anyways, I'll bring up that same teacher in this video here. Okay, I mean, I had this lady for special ed from 1990 and 1992. 5th grade and 6th grade, okay. Well, anyways, 1991, 6th grade, the second and last year I had this lady for a teacher. She'd bought a couple of books. I don't remember what the titles were, but I do remember it had some stuff on instructions on how to raise the kids and all that, and she had, I think that's what it was anyways. I mean, I don't remember all details about these books. What I do remember is one of them, she would, like, print off copies of chapters to send home with me and others who were in her classroom. Basically, you know, you could say attempting to instruct the parents on how to raise the kids, right? my mom was not particularly very happy about it, okay? I remember her talking on the phone to the mom of a friend of mine also on the spectrum who I since found out, from, family tree researching that he's also my distant cousin, but anyways, I remember overhearing my mom tell, his mom some stuff about that, wait a minute. I've been his mom for this many years. I know how to raise my son. I know the proper things to do and all that. If I want to actually read these books, I can go to the store and buy them myself. I don't need some teacher, printing off copies for me to read. If I want to read a book like this, I can go out and check it out myself. And I'm like, yeah, no kidding. If I was a parent, I'd be like, if I want to read a book like this, I have the free will to go and check. If somebody wants to say that, hey, I think it would be a good idea, to read this book, then I could be like, well, maybe I might buy it, or maybe I might check it out at the library, see what it says, examine it, see if I agree with it or disagree with it, whatever, And if I agree with what's in there, then maybe I'll apply the principles, but if I disagree with it, then, I won't apply those principles regardless of what said teacher thinks, except, you know what? I've already concluded, too, that if I ever get married and have kids, I am not sending them off to public schools. Why? Because as you've already heard me describe, public schools are in shambles. And now, back to the disability issues thing. In addition to the fact that I could not get in the AI program, I got into the EI and LD programs in the regular schools, although in Millet Learning Center I ended up in a TMI room, or in, TMI rooms and all that, because, well, most of the students in those rooms were labeled TMI, and the few that weren't were usually ones who were going to regular high schools part-time and all that and stuff. And post-secondary transitional program was run under TMI basically on account of what percentage of attendees were labeled TMI, and in spite of how many in attendance may have been other disabilities, whether it had been epilepsy or the person was in a wheelchair, or the person like me, autistic, or the individual could have had other disabilities like ADHD, LD, EI, whatever, but of course, today there are some individuals with autism that don't even get to be labeled that in the public schools. In fact, I remember one friend of mine who eventually was verified to be autistic, and had already pretty much had that figured out anyways. Well, one school she had attended, although I think this one may have actually been a private school, but because she had gotten to attend that one time, but I don't know if that one had, made this labeling, or if it might have been a public school that did this, but she got labeled emotionally disturbed, and I was like, thinking to myself, you don't pin a label on somebody unless it really is the facts about this person. If a person really was emotionally disturbed, then it would have been okay to say that on the files, but to say that if that's not the actual disability or disorder of the person, then what the heck are you doing labeling them that? And then I also remember, was one mom who has two kids on the spectrum, and I guess her brother's also on the spectrum too, but anyways, and she had said that, well, her son probably will be able to function on his own, but that her daughter, on the other hand, she probably would have to get guardianship over, but when her daughter turned 18 and all that, but anyways, her son, I guess, in addition to being diagnosed autistic, was also diagnosed bipolar, but then some medical officials wanted to remove the bipolar diagnosis, and I thought, what? Because I'm like, if he really is bipolar, why remove that as a diagnosis, okay? And then here it is, you know, there are some schools that don't even want to accept, you know, diagnosis listing, because if they do, then they have to provide this service, that service, this service, that service, whatever, you know. And here's another kicker. A lot of parents don't know that there are actually laws, okay? Because, for instance, you know, there are school officials that will say that whatever's in the school handbook is the final rule. They'll say, the school handbook is our guideline, our Bible for the year. That may be true of the student that's regular ed, but here's the kicker. The special education laws of this country say that each special education student gets an IEP, individual education plan. Whatever is in the IEP, it has final say over the principal and the superintendent. That it doesn't matter what the principal or the superintendent thinks, whatever's in the IEP, it overrules the superintendent and it overrules the principal. Which means thus it also overrules the school handbook. Okay? Which means that that boy that, you know, was issued detention or threatened with one because he needed to go to the bathroom to use catheter, the schools were already told that he had that, you know, need, and that he should be allowed to go to the bathroom anytime he wants, regardless of what the teachers and the schools think. But the violation occurred, and you know what? A lot of public schools like to hide this stuff, because they know what's in the law books, but they don't care what the laws say. They want to do things their way. And they will get away with it until they get caught red-handed, or there's hell raising that goes on. For instance, in my old school district, Birch Run, I remember, okay, that, you know, there was a thing with, you know, MEAT test, Michigan Education Association, or, wait, no, Michigan Educational Achievement Plan, or, I forget what MEAT complete, I mean, I know that the M stands for Michigan and the E stands for educational, but anyways, I know that, like, with regular students, if you fail the MEAT test, then you end up having to go to summer school, and if you fail that, then you end up flunking the grade you were in. But under Michigan law, if you are in special education classes 50% of the time or higher, you do not have to take the MEAT test at all. But Birch Run schools, they were violating it and decided that special ed students had to take it anyways, and if they failed it, they would be flunked just like the regular ed students. Until, well, in '92, my parents went to the school board about this and informed them of the laws. So then the school board had no choice but to change the policy. Now, they did not decide that the special ed student was exempt from taking the MEAT test. What they did decide, however, was that it could not be held against the special ed student, that rather it would be used to determine the intelligence level of the special ed student. And I only got to take part of it in 7th grade, only on account of that I later ended up absent from being sick and all that. But in 8th grade, on the other hand, I did get to take it, but it was decided, though, that it wouldn't get sent to Lansing or wherever it was going to go. It would be sent directly to the counselor's office for the counselor to, overlook and either, say if the answer was right or wrong and all that, but I never got told any results on that test. But either way, whatever the results were, it couldn't be held against me, and, I think I probably passed it anyways, whatever was, on that test. But yeah, there you go. But of course, it's like, but yeah, to this day, some of the public schools, they still like to, do things they do, such as, issuing detentions, all because of whatever kind of need the student has. Like, if the student turns out to have a bladder, if the special needs student has a bladder problem, well, some of the teachers don't care. They still issue detention anyways, and all that, or they'll say, no, you can't go to the bathroom. And a good case scenario, this one girl who is approaching 20 right now, well, she's got low-grade depression and bladder issues as well. And so, of course, she ended up having to wear a diaper, but quite frankly, she actually likes wearing them anyways and all that. But before she started wearing them and all that, there was one teacher who was like, no, you can't go to the bathroom. And so then, her mom had to step in and say, listen up, my daughter has these bladder issues that she has absolutely no control over. So when she has to go to the bathroom, she has to go to the bathroom, and you better let her go. And I'm like, seriously? I think some of these public school teachers are too lazy to, I'm not saying it about all public school teachers, because, there are some good teachers in there, okay? I don't deny that. But there's a whole lot of them that are unfortunately too lazy to do their jobs. And there are even some that think that, oh, it's okay to call the special needs student names or chain them up and all that, or put them in a duffel bag. And it's like, what if there was a fire in the building? Oh, we can just carry the duffel bag out with the student in it. Wait a minute, what if, carrying that student in the duffel bag, the student's head gets banged into something, and he dies? Guess what? The person who put him in the duffel bag and is holding that duffel bag could be prosecuted for murder, and should, guess what, be prosecuted for murder and stripped of teaching license, and if the state issues death penalty, then executed for murder, and if the state prescribes life in prison for that person, lock the person up for life. Okay? And what can I say? The public school system is in shambles. And I know I've made a long video talking about this, but and explaining a lot of things away, but you know what? The truth is what it is. The truth can hurt. Okay? And I understand some people may feel hurt by the truth. Some people may say, you're hurting me with what you're saying on here. I'm like, well, the truth is what it is, and sure, the truth hurts. Okay? But the truth is what it is. And if you can't handle the truth, that's too bad. Because you know what? If you don't want to do your job, if bullying's going on, and you don't want to do anything about it because you're like, oh, that person's not going to listen. Well, hey, guess what's going to happen to that? Guess what's going to happen next? For all we know, the person who gets bullied could decide to resort to drugs and alcohol, and that's not good. And the person doing the bullying could turn into a serial rapist. You think that's a good idea? No. I don't think it's a good idea that these things happen. And not too long ago, you know, there was this teen in Saginaw County who decided to commit suicide because he was getting bullied. And I tell you what, it's tragic that this sort of thing happened, and it's not even the first time that people, you know, have committed suicide because they're getting bullied, because it has happened very frequently, more times than what I am even, you know, wanting to say or discuss or anything. And what I can say is that it's horrific and it's tragic. And, you know, and ever since God got kicked out of the public schools, you know, the public schools are even worse than before. They're not teaching personal responsibility. In fact, there's this story that I remember learning as a kid about when there's this hen and the chickens, and the hen's doing all the work while the chickens decide to play and do nothing. And the hen, you know, decides she's going to eat the bread by herself because the chickens didn't want to help her. And that story got taught in school basically for the purpose of teaching personal responsibility and hard work. And that if you want something, you work for it. But now they've changed the story in the public schools. Because guess what? Now when they tell the story of the hen that's doing all the work and the chickens that are up playing, not doing any of the work, the chickens, you know, get to eat the bread anyways in spite of not working. And the new story is the hen gives the chickens the bread anyways because she was happy to do all the work. And, I mean, when I got told of that story, I was like, I remember that ain't how the story went when I was taught this as a kid. The story went, but the chickens got no bread. And I was told, yeah, that's right. But the story they teach in school now has changed. Because now the public schools teach that, oh, you don't have to work to get what you want, that it's okay, that you can just, you know, expect others who are doing all the work to give to you anyways, even if they don't want to, or whatever, and all that. And I'm like, what kind of shambles, you know? And on top of that, some of these teachers in the and like I said, you know, I'm not saying that about all public school teachers, because, I mean, there are some good ones out there, I don't deny it, but there's a whole lot of them that they just don't want to do their jobs. They just want to come in, get paid, and do virtually nothing else, and act like, oh, you know, that basically, and I'm like, seriously? Something needs to be done about the education system. For instance, we need to quit giving raises to teachers that don't want to do nothing. The only ones that should get raises are the ones that are actually doing their jobs. The ones that actually do their jobs, whether it's in public or private school, but yeah, those ones should get raises and get awarded for doing their jobs. But if you're not doing your job, you should be fired from your job. And these days, you know, some of them are taking unfair advantage of union privileges. Like, for instance, there was this teacher who had deranged mental ideas, and one of them had something to do with, like, UFO alien-related stuff. And, well, okay, you know, not all people who believe in aliens and UFOs are deranged and all that, okay? Because, you know, I had been a UFO, you know, person myself long ago, and well, actually, I still do believe in the existence of UFOs, although nowadays I believe that the aliens driving them are not actually from all these different faraway planets, but that they're actually demonic beings working for Satan. And the reason I believe that way is because when you look at these stories of all these people that claim to have been abducted, they talk about foul smell from these aliens. And they all speak of traumatic stories as well. And a lot of them have felt traumatized. Some have ended up having to visit psychiatric hospitals because they're feeling mentally traumatized ever since the experiences that they talk about, okay? So, you know, from the studies that I've done on these stories, I'm like, wow, okay, here it is, though, there was this teacher who was really taking some of this UFO stuff too far, and far enough to actually warrant that there may have been something mentally up with her. I don't know if it was that she was claiming that space aliens from other planets were coming to invade, or I don't know what it was, but it was something to do with, like, the way she was talking to the children and all that, and whatever it was something that it created grounds to have her fired from her job so that she couldn't teach kids no more. But no matter what kind of efforts were done to get her removed from the job, because she was obviously too unstable to work the job and shouldn't be teaching, no, she couldn't get fired because of union stuff. And I'm not saying that it's bad for unions to exist, because, you know, I support the right of unions to be in existence, but I also support right to work, because, you know what, if we had that implemented, people would be allowed to decide if they even want to be in the unions or not, and the union bosses wouldn't be in all that much power anymore. And, of course, long ago when that teacher strike law first, you know, went into effect, that would involve fining you a day's pay if you went on strike and all that. I mean, well, even back then, you know, I was not really a fan of teacher strikes to begin with, only because it would mean missing school and having to make up for missed time, but at the same time, I had way back when felt that they had a right to do it anyways, and I had also felt that their constitutional right was being violated. But as I researched further on this, I'm like, well, you know what, if it's a public sector job, you're working for the public. And so that means if, you know, you're wanting to protest regarding certain things, you can always do it outside the working hours. I mean, heck, after that strike law went into effect, there were, you know, staff people that had, you know, joined in, that had, you know, gone about doing their protests, and hey, they were, of course, exercising their right to do that, including holding up signs that said, please don't make us strike, you know, and go on strike and all that, and because, well, some of them will still do it anyways, because it's not like you're going to actually go to jail for it. Plus, there was a loophole later found anyways, where the only way the fines could be issued was if the superintendent actually filed a report, and then if he didn't file a report, then the fines couldn't be issued. But, you know, but I've heard good points raised about that, hey, wait a minute, you know, you guys that if you're, on government payroll, you're working for the public. Meaning you work for us, the people. So you better do your job for us, the people. And if you're not doing your job for the people, you shouldn't be working that job to begin with. And sad to say, unless things change, I can guarantee you right now, if I ever have kids, I'm not going to be putting them in public schools. No way. No how. And to anybody watching this, I recommend that, you don't put your kids in public schools either. It's not a wise thing to do. It's like throwing them to the wolves. I mean, it's in shambles, it's messed up, and that system needs reforms. Thank you for watching, and God bless.